Well, hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Unlocked Show. It is the final episode of 2021. What a flaming year it has been. I hope you guys have had a fantastic year. It has been one of those years that's been filled with lots of, I'm going to say, very highs and a few little lows. But along the way, I look back and I go, those little lows that we had are just little blips on the radar now. So I am well and truly looking forward to welcoming in the year of 2022. And to kind of round up this year, I have got an amazing guest with me today. I know you guys are really, really interested in hearing about how the heck do you market like these really big brands. And I'm talking about the brands like Nike. I've got Parker Nash with me today, and he is an 11-year veteran of Nike, where he grew the lines of their business to more than $500 million in annual revenue. While he was at Nike, he actually realized that the process that they used to build a brand was something that any and all businesses could do, which inspired him to actually start his own copywriting and marketing agency, which he does right now, that helps small and medium-sized businesses to stand out and grow a clear message and marketing sales funnel. So I'm really excited to have Parker on today's show, because I know it's been some tough times for a lot of people out there with COVID and, this pandemic kind of slowing us down over the last couple of years. It has done for some, but for others, those that have really, I suppose, pivoted and have been very flexible, there has been some huge amount of opportunity that has come out of this last couple of years. And I know that this conversation that I'm going to have with Parker today is going to be really insightful and also extremely helpful for you guys to be able to take what he shares with you today and actually implement that into your marketing strategy in 2022. So welcome to the show, Parker. I'm super excited about today's conversation. Love to pull the curtain back on what's been going on at Nike, pick your brain and really, I suppose, uncover some of the secrets to how you really help Nike grow their brand to being such a juggernaut in the business.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on, and I'm excited to talk about this.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Well, hey, let's get stuck in. As I said, you guys know that this is a live show. So if you're watching right now, just make sure that you allow StreamYard to see you so that you can actually converse with both Parker and I. Today's conversation, you guys are going to want to ask questions, I'm sure of it. So make sure that you do that so that you can actually type in the comments and Parker and I can see your comments here in our studio. If you do not allow StreamYard to see you, we won't have a clue what you're saying, and I'm afraid we're going to miss your question. So please make sure you do that, because we want to make sure that we provide you with the answers to any questions that you have. So, hey, Parker, your time at Nike, spending those 11 years there and helping them really grow that brand to being, I suppose, the global juggernaut that it is today. What are some of the things that, you saw there whilst you were there and you thought, gosh, I could take some of this stuff away from there? And this doesn't just apply to somebody who's got billions of dollars to be able to spend in marketing. How do you apply that to somebody who's got, a few dollars in the bank and utilizing those skills to be able to implement something on a shoestring budget?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And, it's well, one, I think I could talk about this stuff for forever, but honestly, I think it's a really important thing is whether it's Nike or an Amazon or, any of these large billion-dollar world-renowned brands that we know and like, is you probably think I can never do what they do because I don't have these resources or I don't have this stuff. But, if you really think about what has made them successful, there's a handful of principles that really is what their whole business is, their branding, their marketing, and their process to attract customers are developed and based on. And these principles aren't things that, if you have the right frameworks, if you have some wherewithal on how to implement it yourself, I mean, it can just be sweat equity and not necessarily tons of money for you to do. But the one thing, if I was going to say, if there's one thing I really learned from working at Nike, and it was drilled into my mind and brain and basically seared into all the work I ever did, was you have to obsess your consumer, your customers. And I know that probably sounds like a bit of a obvious thing to say, but I don't think many people, unless you've been inside working at a company like Nike or any of those equivalents, maybe don't realize how much time companies like Nike spend thinking, talking, researching, and focusing on their consumers and what they need, what the problems they have in their life as it relates to their product or service, and how they can solve them for them. I think a lot of small businesses or entrepreneurs or and the likes, they realize that there's a problem out there, but perhaps they think that, hey, if I have this problem, everybody else must have this problem, and if I get this, they'll get it too. Well, it's not really the case, and you have to be really clear about how your product or service helps your customers, the problem that they have, and how you communicate that to them. So, when we were working on product and every of the projects that we had, we spent a ton of time focusing on the consumer, what their needs were, and making sure we could communicate that to them in a way that got them to actually respond. And that was, I mean, gosh, that might be half or maybe more of the time we spent is just focusing on that, because without that key focus, none of the efforts after that really mattered if you're off the mark there. And, really talking with, frankly, what I see a lot of times with small businesses is they think they have to tell their own story, or they have to be talking about why I started my business or why I do this. And if you're ever watching TV, wherever you live, pop on the TV and pay attention to ads. And when you're watching an ad break, see, it's best when sometimes this happens, a brand like Nike or an Amazon or, one of those huge brands has an ad, and how they communicate that ad they're doing. And then if a local business comes on, how they communicate. More often than not, I see those small businesses, those local businesses, what they do is they end up talking about themselves. They don't talk about their customers, their consumers. They're talking about why they started their business, why it's such a great place to work, blah, 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 all these kind of things. And here's the reality, and I don't mean this to sound harsh or mean, but listen, no one really cares about our businesses. They only really care about how our business can help them with the problem that they're dealing with. That's really what the key of that. And so, honestly, this is kind of a long way of saying, first and foremost, it's start with your consumer and obsess them and really get clear on how you're going to help them out and communicate that to them.
And I love, and it's really interesting that you're talking about this, because I just wrote some for some of our clients that we work with, really getting them to focus on, as you say, obsessing about the consumer, obsessing about who is it that you actually are serving? What are their problems? What are their frustrations? Right. What is it that they actually want? And I find it's like, to think that a brand like Nike spends so much time, really obsessing about that, when the reality, when you think, gosh, they're just making shoes. You know what I mean? Like, what's the problem? People need to protect their feet, put shoes on their feet. Right. But to know and understand that a brand such as Nike spends so much time really delving deep. So I want to go here. It's kind of that level of understanding, because on the surface, it's like, okay, so Nike just creates shoes, right?
Sure.
So how deep do we go in trying to obsess and understand our customer at the deepest level, so that you can communicate in a way that, like you say, when you look at the big brands on television that are doing commercials, and they've really immersed themselves and understand who it is that they're trying to talk to. And there's this phrase, like we hear this phrase, particularly in the entrepreneurship, a lot, is people need to know you, like you, trust you, and then they'll do business with you. Right. But what you're actually saying is that people do business with people that not just that they like, but are like them.
Yes.
And when you're creating your messaging, and a person can insert themselves into that brand message, as in, that's me, I'm like them, I want to wear Nike shoes because I'm like that person. That person whom I am wears the Nike shoe. It makes the world of difference. So can we go a little bit deeper? I want to help people to understand, when you are really obsessing about your consumer, how deep do we go, and how much information should we understand about our consumer?
Right. Yeah. Good question. And, frankly, companies like Nike, and I understand small businesses will not have this level of resources, but there are teams solely dedicated to researching Nike's consumers and who they're trying to target. And frankly, they go really, really deep. I mean, of course, a company like Nike has many different types of consumers. And so because they apply to different genders, different sports, it's just so broad. There's so many people, but they don't market in a broad sense. They market in a really targeted, refined sense in terms of, okay, we're making product and we're going to market product for the running consumer. And then we're going to get down to what kind of runner is this consumer? Are they an everyday runner? Are they a competitive runner? Are they a casual runner? What are those different areas? And then they get down to really digging into what are the problems that they're currently dealing with as they are running, and trying to see what observations they can get to and kind of glean and take in for points of inspiration for either creating product or communicating how the product they have will help them. But then also they go as far as they want to know anything and everything they can about their consumer, because it's not just, hey, this person's only a runner here at this point when they're running. There's major inspiration points throughout their entire life that can apply to what we're trying to do and communicate with them. So they want to know, what are they doing on and off the track? What are they doing in their free time? Who are their points of inspiration? Who inspires them? Where are they getting pieces of influence from? And they're really trying to get all that information so they can have such a clear picture of, and honestly, this generally comes down to this, is one muse, this is the person that we are creating product for and marketing to. And so when we have that clear vision of who this person is, what do they want, what's the problems they're dealing with, and who do they want to become, because transformation and aspirational identity are really, really key to great marketing. Those are the things that we need to get out of there so that we can either create great product and also communicate that in a way that gets them to engage.
And I love the fact that you've gone down this path. And obviously, we're talking a big brand like Nike, they've kind of got it together, but this whole transformation and who do they want to become? Because that applies to any business. So if you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, an online marketer, an online course creator, a small business, everybody wants. When we purchase something, we're wanting to become something. We want some form of transformation. And I really do think, like I've certainly seen this a lot in this last couple of years, with people really starting to think about, what do I really want out of my life now? So it's really quite interesting what's been happening with, I suppose this is one of the rollout benefits of a pandemic such as COVID, because it really has made people think about what they want to do and what they want to become. And that transformational piece sits solidly inside of that. What do they actually want? And that aspirational identity of, we call it in my world, the struggling avatar. What are they struggling with? What are their problems right now? Now, what does that struggling person actually want to become? Who do they aspire to be?
Yeah, exactly. And, I think the really key thing is here too, and you obviously understand this quite well, is not assuming your customers or consumers will know what that transformation is. You need to tell them what that transformation is. I think there's oftentimes, as business owners, we get so involved in the product or the business that we're creating that it's hard to really picture what it's like for someone that doesn't know as much as we do about our business to understand what this product or service is going to do for us. So you have to be really clear and obvious and tell them, hey, when you do this, when you use this, our product or service, and you're dealing with this problem, we're going to solve this problem for you so that you can get this result, or you can have this transformation. And those are really key pieces to have. And just not assuming people will know what you do, know how it's going to make their life better, and know what's sitting on the other side of the fence after they engage with you.
Oh, you're speaking my language. I love that. So, and you mentioned this right at the beginning. We could talk about this for hours and hours, and we absolutely could. And a lot of the time, I find it easier too when you name that like you can actually give a title or a name to that's what we call the struggling avatar
Right.
and the aspirational, because then it helps them to paint the picture of, okay, for example, in one of the programs that I teach in, which is called Influence and Authority Method, and we teach people actually how to run their own show. But you're going from being an unknown expert. So they're an expert in their own right, but they're the unknown expert, and they're trying to figure out how the heck do I get my message and my, myself out there. And the aspiration that they're looking for is to become the sought after expert. That's the transformational piece. And that part in the middle that you speak of becomes the marketing piece, right? Is the message, is the branding, is the story that we tell that helps people to understand how they actually get that transformation to go from where they are now to that aspirational piece.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sorry. And just to echo what you're saying here too. And that's where you really start to see these really well-known brands doing is they're great storytellers. But I hope people that are listening to this and watching this understand that you don't have to have a huge production value to be a great storyteller. It can be a simple email to some of your customers, your leads, that tells of that transformational story that is just as effective as a huge brand campaign too.
Well, I think this is a great place to go next is how do you tell a story, right? Because in that mix of, okay, so we've got this transformation and I've done my research and I understand who my consumer is. Now, switching things up and because a lot of people would talk about tell the story, the brand of you, right? Why did you start doing what you're doing? Why are you so special? Why do you, like you mentioned, why is it such a great place to work? All of that sort of stuff. Now, how do you actually tell a story or create a story that tells the journey of your consumer, of that transformation from a consumer's point of view? What are some of the elements that you need to put into that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's a handful of things that you must have, which is first, it has to start with identifying what your customers want or your consumers want, the desire that they have. What do they want from as it relates to your product or service, right? Starting there and getting really specific on that. And it kind of in addition to that is also what we were just talking about is who do they aspire to be? Because those kind of go hand in hand together. And if you're able to talk about those and start with those, that's where you start to get, and this is where the, getting really specific on who you're speaking with is really important, because when you're saying, hey, we know you're this, we know you're dealing with this, and we know that you want this, that's when someone comes across that message and goes, oh,
that's talking to me.
You're talking to me.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, it's that. What does your customer want? Second is what's holding them back from getting what they want. So the problem. I mean, this is really just good copywriting, tactics and strategies that any good copywriting coach would ever tell you is start with the problem, because we are risk averse, and also basically it's just a survival tactic of where we are and it evolved as humans, that we want to avoid things that could harm us, right? So if you talk about the problems your customers have, I'm going to pay attention to that because, I should pay attention to this. This could affect me some way. How's it going to affect me? So starting with what they need, the problem that they have, lay out a process for them to overcome that problem by using your product or service, and then show them, tell them, explain to them how their life's going to be better or worse, whether or not they use your product or not, right? So those are some of the key elements you have to have when you're talking about your product, your service, your business. And those are really key messages that go through your website, your emails, social media posts, and gosh, I mean, basically anywhere and everywhere that your customers are going to come in contact with you. And sometimes it's all those elements all in one thing, like your website, your homepage website's a great place for that. And sometimes it's just pieces of it, right? And shorter form content, the social media post or something like that. They're little tidbits that get people to pique their curiosity and say, hey, this is interesting. Tell me more about this. That's all you're trying to do, right?
And obviously, I mean, that is a really simple framework and process of being able to tell that story that in a way that actually gets people to pay attention. Because like you were saying, when I had the saying we talk about with the students, when you can explain somebody else's problems better than they can, they will often kind of assign you as being, the person who's actually got the answer to the problem that I have. And so the better and the more, I suppose, detailed you can be about understanding what challenges they are facing right now and the problems they have, the more they're going to actually pay attention and listen to you, because it's like, he gets me. He understands. Gosh, he understands where I'm at now. He's like me.
Right. And that's what's amazing about Nike's, Amazon, all these huge brands is, and that's why they do so much of this research on their consumers and customers, is because they are reaching billions of people every day, every year. But they do it in a way that, because they've spent so much time focusing on who their consumers are, that when they communicate to them, we're all going, oh my gosh, how did they know that about me? How did they know I was thinking that? Well, they've spent so much time doing that, frankly, a lot of these great brands and marketers are probably a little bit, could be psychologists as well too, about understanding how we think, right?
Yeah, well, we're not just looking at kind of the demographics. You're looking at the psychographics of every component of who this person is, what makes them tick, what are the things that they enjoy doing. Because, like you say, when we can understand it at that, really be obsessed with them and understanding at that deep level, you have a much better opportunity to be able to solve their problem and tell the story in a way that comes across, that actually places them in the story instead of it coming from a different angle. What would you consider, like, now you've spent a substantial amount of time in a multi-billion-dollar business, and now being able to step away from that, what are some of the things that, I suppose, marketing collateral that a small business that doesn't have billions and billions of dollars to be able to spend on marketing should absolutely have?
Right. So, and this is good that we've been talking about this so much, is what we're talking about here first is not necessarily like, hey, I'm going to show you, this is my first piece of marketing collateral. It's a little bit more intangible, but what we're talking about is a clear message first, right? You have to have a clear message and a consistent message, because that's going to flow through all the pieces of collateral that you will need to create for your business. And of course, every business is different depending on what stage you're at and the industry you're in. But essentially, I think there's a handful of things that we all definitely need. So first, clear message that really is consumer focused messaging. Second is a website, an effective website that helps to reinforce and explain and tell that story of the consumers and customers you are trying to attract. So that's really where first place where that clear message shows up. But then you need a couple other things. And again, this depends on the industry, the business you are in. There's tons of different ways to execute this. But here's the thing: unless you're selling something that's $5 purchase, it's really, frankly, pretty quick transactional item. The higher in price your product or service goes, the more nurturing you're going to need to do. And so the first time someone comes across your brand for the first time, they're most likely then not going to buy your product or service. So finding a way to incentivize them to stay in touch with you. This is what we call a lead magnet or a lead generator. A free resource you can give them in exchange for further information, their email address, their phone number, whatever it ends up being that's right for your business. How can you do that so you can at least get them into your fold so that you can start providing them value, nurture them, give them ways to overcome the problems that they're dealing with, so that when they are eventually ready to address the problem that you solve, you're top of mind for them. And so that's where those ongoing pieces of marketing collateral come into place. So email marketing is still incredibly effective. I know there's a million other different ways to reach your customers, but listen, as far as tech goes, it's a little bit old tech in terms of what we're doing, but email marketing is still incredibly effective. So having a great process to nurture your customers through emails is good. And then having a plan to show up and get in front of your customers and add value. Is that social media? Is that by partnering with other businesses? Just basically getting in front of your customers and providing value. I think that's another thing that what we're really talking about here too is why brands like Nike become so successful, is because people see them and go, well, they aren't just out for themselves, they're out to help me. So you want to be known as the brand that's helpful, useful, resourceful, someone they can trust. That's really what building trust and empathy is giving people opportunities to overcome the problems they have. And they just want to be that's kind of what's in it for being and creating a likable brand, is being helpful too.
Absolutely. Well, and like you jumping on shows such as the Unlock show today, and sharing your helpful tips and tools and resources for people is another great way of being able to, to establish that brand credibility over time, because you're being very, and I think the other thing that is really important with this is consistency, right?
Yep.
Is like they get to trust you because they know and can rely on you to show up and be really consistent with your brand messaging, the fact that you are there and you're actually somebody whom is willing to add value.
Exactly. And this is what you're hitting on here too, is a couple really important principles too. And this is kind of the, maybe this is a little bit of the athlete's mindset that was where Nike comes from, is servicing athletes, is repetition and consistency, right? Repeating, Nike is known for the swoosh and their tagline, just do it, because it's everywhere and it's repeated over and over and over and over and over. They landed on it, they got it, and they kept running with it for 50 years. They didn't keep tinkering with it. They didn't keep changing it, because repetition is what good marketing is. So that when you see something, you hear something, it's coming from this brand. And then second, what you're just saying is the consistency, is showing up on a routine basis to add value to your customers. That's what you're trying to do. And that's what great marketing is helping your customers out. And I'm going to echo your other point too, what you just talked about here. And this is another key principle of what Nike has done to scale themselves to this point, is they built amazing partnerships. And in some ways, what we're doing right here today is like a little mini partnership, right? We're having a nice conversation that will be sent out to our respective audiences. And it's mutually beneficial for us. It's mutually beneficial for the listeners and the watchers of this show and the podcast. And that's a great partnership. That's what Nike's done too, by sponsoring athletes, partnering with leagues, is they know that if we partner with these great other brands, it will give us more opportunity to tap into the audiences that they've helped create and help to build on their own as well.
Absolutely. It did right. I mean, you're seeing all those big brands absolutely do that, kind of partner with various different people to expand their networks and expand their sphere of influence, I suppose is what we would call it. Let's talk a little bit about some of these myths, because I know, we've talked a lot about Nike today, and a lot of people will be sitting back, and even though today's show was, entitled, how to market like a billionaire without, like $1 billion company without having billions of dollars. What are some of the other myths that really prevent small businesses from having the success that they deserve, because they've brought into the beliefs of these particular myths?
Yeah, great question. I mean, if going back to what we were just talking about here, and so I think one of the myths that we can, at least in work I do and stumble across sometimes, and this is a bit maybe of a line of thinking that's fairly rigid and stuck, is thinking I have to have a lot of money to be able to make money. If I don't have money, I don't have the resources to spend on Facebook ads or SEO or all these things that, they can cost a lot of money. But what we've just talked about for the first part of this show, again, that doesn't have to cost you much money at all, right? That's concerted time and effort, thinking about your consumer, creating a clear message, creating some key pieces of marketing collateral to engage and reach them. Some people, and many people, can do that on their own, or for very little can have someone help them out on the pieces that they do need help with. So, those kind of things don't have to cost a whole lot. So having, needing to have a ton of money to then go make money, that's definitely a myth that you just don't necessarily have to do, right? I mean, shoot, you got to think about just going back to this, the way Nike started. It started with Phil Knight, an old Volkswagen bus, and a shoe that he had been tinkering with that was a little bit better for runners that he wanted to apply to. And he drove around the country selling the shoe out of the back of his van. That didn't cost much money to do that, right? So there's plenty of ways to get past that. But I think another myth that many business owners and entrepreneurs have is thinking that it's the old philosophy of, or saying that if you build it, they will come. Well, you can create a website, you can create the coolest looking brand, you can have the greatest logo, you can have an Instagram profile or in whatever, but unless you give people a reason to come to you, they're not going to show up, right? So you pressing launch on your website or whatever thing you're working on, there's no guarantee that people are going to show up. You have to give them a reason to show up. And generally that means helping them out. How can you add value for them? So I think that's another big myth that a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs come across. And then frankly, sometimes I see this quite a bit, and this may seem a bit counterintuitive coming from a guy that spent so much time at a brand that was so design focused. But I think for the vast majority of businesses, you do not need to spend a fortune on creating a cool looking brand. And now that should be a caveat there. Unless you're in a luxury brand or a fashion brand, okay, having a great logo or great fonts or whatever typeface you're doing for your brand will be important. But I can still guarantee you this: no one's going to pay attention more than you as the business owner to, should I use this font or that font, or this color or that color? As long as it doesn't look offensive, it is to a certain design level, people will not pay attention to it. And anything above that may just be diminishing margin returns, which cost you a lot of money as well too.
I think you're right with that. People will forgive, maybe some not polished branding if what they're receiving actually provides a result, gets them, delivers on the promise, the value, the promise of value that you that you promised in the first instance. People are willing to kind of forgive some of that, and I've seen some brands even start with no website, no brand at all, but just a great solution because they understood, this is what this whole conversation has been built around, is really understanding who your consumer is. And when you understand them at that level, a lot of the other stuff you can kind of, I'm going to say, for the most part, get away with having something that may be a little subpar to begin with until such time as you get going.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, get it to a level that is good and serviceable, right? If you get past there, I mean, there is a point if your design is, for example, we're talking about in the case of like a website or something where it's cluttered and there's a lot going on. Okay, now we actually do need to focus on this because it could be distracting people from actually seeing the important things they need to see and read to then want to engage with your brand. So make sure it's past there. But now, again, should I use this sans serif font at this weight versus this one? As long as they both look good and you're consistent across how you go about it, you're probably the only one that's going to notice the difference between the two at that point.
And it comes back to that, repetition and consistency. If you create, it doesn't matter what you're using, as long as it's repetitive throughout everything, your entire website. You don't want to have, one font on one page and another font on another. And often less is more. If you start out with just really clean, nice, lots of use of white space, it's a good place to start. And like you say, you can always, improve on it as time goes on. So we've covered off, some of these myths. Are there any others that you want to just sort of throw in here? Because I can think of a couple of others that I often see people kind of getting stuck with as well.
Yeah, I think so. I got a couple, and I'd love to hear what you have to add in addition to that too. But so this goes back to the original point of the conversation here about telling your story, as in your brand story. You don't, again, people only care about how your business, people don't care about your business. They care about how your business helps them, right? So making sure the story you are telling is your customer's story, not your story. And then I think the other thing, and I hope this is, hopefully we can, maybe this relieves some pressure for some business owners, is especially just with, I don't know, it seems like every month there's some new tool, some new gadget, some new social media network. Listen, you don't need to be everywhere on everything for all of your customers, right? Go find out where your customers and consumers are and show up there. So maybe that is several social media platforms. Maybe it's just one. Or maybe for what you do, building a highly engaged email list is all that you must do for your business. So, take it in what is manageable for you, for your company, for your business. And again, repetition and consistency. That's what's really going to be the most valuable, is showing up and adding value on a consistent basis, wherever that is.
Absolutely. You talked about, not having to be everywhere, because one of the myths I think has been for a lot of people is, oh my God, I've heard that I've got to be on Instagram, and I've got to be on TikTok, and I've got to be on LinkedIn and YouTube and so on, and so Facebook and Instagram, all these different places.
It's overwhelming.
Which, as you say, it can be extremely overwhelming. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to add to that, just as solutions to that problem. And one is, I'm a big fan of creating a show, and the reason for that, and you hear me echo this over and over and over again, that whole repetition and consistency, is because of the fact that something like this, which is really simple to do, actually enables you to create content to enable you to be in lots and lots of different places. Whereas what a lot of people think is, oh my God, I've got to try and create a piece of content for Facebook, and now I've got to go over and do a meme or a post or an infographic for Pinterest, and something else for Instagram, and so on and so forth. And I just love the fact that when we do a show such as this with people like you, that we're actually able to create multiple pieces of content that go out to all of those places in a really effective and strategic way. So, there is a way that you can be everywhere without necessarily spending a whole lot of time trying to create lots of things to be everywhere. The other is sort of touching on this whole myth of I have to know something about, I've got to be tech savvy. And that actually is one of the things also that holds a lot of people back, right? Is thinking that I don't know enough about the technical aspects. I don't know how to build a website. I don't know how to, create all of these different things that I need. And like you say, if you can, break this down into a really simple strategy, then it will enable you to just bite one piece of the cherry at a time, just do one thing at a time, focus on where your customers are at. So find the platform that your customer avatar or your consumer is in, that they're spending the majority of their time, and master that one first. And then you can branch out from there. So I think those are a couple of extra things I just wanted to throw in and add to the mix. So one of the, before we kind of wrap today up, I want to know, given that we've had this, I'm going to say coming on 2 years now, it feels like an age, doesn't it? That we've been in this pandemic and COVID, and it's kind of throwing things up in the air for a lot of businesses. And before us jumping on and going live, we were talking about the impacts it's had on small businesses, in particular, small cafes and restaurants and that sort of thing. I'm interested, or I'm curious to know, whilst you were at Nike, did you see a major difference in what they were doing pre-COVID compared to what they're doing during COVID, and maybe even some of their thoughts about what are they going to do, planning for, that whole struggling avatar to the aspirational transformation? What does post-COVID look like for people, in the marketing world?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, so much stuff, right? But I think, I think this is kind of where it's really getting to is people have maybe changed their perspective a bit on what's important to them in their life, right? It's
Yeah.
We've had a heavy dose of perspective given to us all, right? And so figuring out what is, I just think it really goes back to always staying in a kind of on your toes, athletic stance, metaphorically speaking here, of how am I adapting and changing to how my consumer and customers are adapting and changing, and not being so rigid and this is the way I approach things, or this is the way I communicate with them, this is the way I market. Is, hey, if you know them well, which you should be doing, speak to the problems and issues that they're dealing with right now that's relevant to them in their life. Speak to that, and also see how else can you solve some of the new problems that have popped up because of the circumstances we're all in because of that. And so, I think more and more and more what we're seeing is larger brands and bigger brands taking actually kind of more of a smaller business approach to it, of how do I get more control over my brand so I can create more one-to-one feeling type connections with my consumers. So, I mean, to me, that's actually a huge benefit for smaller businesses, is that you are small, you have that personal connection, and that larger brands just don't have. But really being able to adapt to how your customers are feeling and make sure that you serve them through product or the services you have, or with just showing up and adding value when you're connecting with them.
Absolutely. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because, if we talk about, I mean, so far away from, shoes, but, the whole restaurant industry. And as
Yeah.
we're talking about this whole adaptation and understanding what the consumer is actually doing. And I'm looking around in my own sort of local community with a lot of the changes, the mandates and restrictions that have been going on, particularly, well, here in Australia, and I know around the world, have really been impacting the food industry
Right.
completely. So just thinking about, how can you adapt? And like you say, because we are much smaller, you're a lot more nimble. You're able to really be quite athletic because you're able to move really quickly without
Right.
having to move, a huge, cruise liner, so to speak. You've got a little, we call it a tinny here in Australia.
Yeah.
You can make some moves pretty much on the spot. So I think, this environment is really conducive to those businesses that are willing to be flexible, are willing to keep their eyes open and stay abreast of what's going on. And like you say, it's not just understanding once what's going on with your customer and doing that research once. It's continuously researching. And in this environment now, when we're seeing people make those changes, really, I suppose, stopping for a moment, taking stock of what's going on, re-evaluating what they want in their life, you also need to start re-evaluating your customer, your consumer, and understanding the changes and the transformations that they're actually making in their own lives. Because if you don't do that, you're very much going to continue being and spruiking the messages that were pre-COVID, where your consumer has actually moved on from that. They've made some transformations themselves personally. I'm certainly hearing a lot of people talk about the growth and the transformations they've made in the last couple of years. And to be a business that is staying up to date and moving with those times is going to really is going to be the difference between those businesses that really make it in the next little while and those that don't. I mean, if I were who knows whether or not a strategy like this would work, but if you're a restaurant right now, I would be thinking about how do you make a really high ticket item that maybe you have your staff member actually go into homes and create that
Right.
same dine-in experience, but maybe in somebody's home, and it might be $1,000 a night, but you've just, for 10 people or something like that, but you've just, created a high level experience that that means that you're going to be able to keep your clientele.
Yeah. And I mean, great. That's a great idea. I was kind of thinking of a similar thing too on that same line, and thinking about too, like, hey, shoot, getting rid of those limiting beliefs because of like, well, I don't know if someone's going to do that or not. Like, well, hey, many of your clients or customers potentially have not really ate out much or gone to cafes or restaurants. And so they have some discretionary income that maybe they would normally put towards, weekly nights out at dinner that they haven't done for a while. And shoot, I think at this point, many of us are going, for a high price tag, I'll pay anything just to have a really fantastic experience that might be the highlight of the year for us.
Absolutely. And imagine doing something like that, in your own home where it's been decked out as if it were, that experience of a restaurant, which most people wouldn't ever have access to. It's a completely different level of experience that you're going to be providing. And not only that, you've got a potential market. When we've been talking about we haven't said the word niching down, but when you understand your market so well and your customer, you get very, very focused and specific on what their needs are. You've got a whole market out there of, I'm going to say, unveed customers that aren't able to go to restaurants anymore.
Sure.
You're able to create that same restaurant dining experience, but in just a different way. This is just one, I suppose we're just using this as an example of how you can think outside the box. How do we think outside the square, become nimble and flexible in the current environment, and be looking for opportunities? Sometimes those opportunities are right at our feet and we don't always see them.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this comes back to what we've kind of been talking about this whole time, which is if you are just obsessive and thinking about how can I help my customers or consumers, and you think about that and you obsess that of how can I help them out, you will find opportunities to help them out in ways that maybe you traditionally hadn't done before.
Absolutely. So I want to, this has been a really great conversation. I mean, like you say, we could just continue, down this path for a long time. We could probably do it, 2 or 3 hours on this. But I think that the conversation that we've had today and the wisdom and the information that you've shared, particularly from a big business perspective, but being able to dilute that, be able to bring it down, not dilute it, but bring it down to anybody's world, whether you're starting out, you've got a concept and an idea, starting with what Parker's been talking about today, understanding who that consumer is, what are their problems, what are their struggles, their frustrations, and then creating your product, your solution around that is going to really stand you apart from everybody else. And then being able to tell your story in a way that puts them at the center of that conversation that you're having, because you actually want to, and I think a lot of the time, story, when we talk about it from that perspective, story is often kind of a one-way dialogue, whereas what we've actually spoken about today is more of a conversation, because you're actually putting that consumer at the center of a conversation. They actually feel as though they're having it's a two-way dialogue, because they're like, I get it, I understand what you're talking about, that's me. They start actually having some internal dialogue themselves and creating you as the solution to their problem. So I absolutely love this. I know there's a couple of places that people can go and get some more information from you, Parker. So if they want to have more conversation with you on social, where are the best places that they can go to continue those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. Find me on LinkedIn. I think that's the best place for your people to find me, is go to LinkedIn. There's not too many Parker Nashes out there, so I'm sure you can just type in my name, Parker Nash, in LinkedIn and find me there, connect with me there. And then frankly, if you want a free resource that I've developed that is really talking about and jumps into some more practical tips and kind of what we've been talking about today, I have a resource called the 3-Part Business Boost, and it's 3 short videos that will help your business owners and entrepreneurs transform their marketing and grow their business. And you can go to my website to do that. So that's at parkertnash.com/boost is where you can find that.
Beautiful, guys. And if you're watching right now, you can see that that site running across the bottom of the screen right now. Now, there's a couple of other things I want to share with everybody because we've spoken about, websites. We've talked about email marketing. And because you guys are viewers of the Unlock Show, and you guys know that I'm also the owner of the platform Usability, which also provides you with the opportunity to be able to create your website really simply and easily. It also has inbuilt email marketing with it. So you guys will love that. You can head on over to www.usability.com. Usability is spelled YOUZABILITY.com. You can enter the password, or I should say code word unlocked, and that will also give you a 10% discount if you decide that you want to move forward and utilize that Usability platform. If you sign up today, you're going to get a 14-day free trial, so you can have a bit of a play. There's some beautiful templates already created in there for you guys to use. So the stuff that Parker's been talking about as far as branding and setting your sites up really simply, Usability is going to make that easy for you. And other than that, if you're wanting to also create yourself your own live show, you want to be the host of your own live show and be able to create all of your marketing material in less than 2 hours a week, then you need to join my free Facebook group. Go to Live Show Secrets on Facebook, join the group, and you'll get a 14-day free program, which both Vicky Helm and I have created to help you guys launch your own live show in 2022. So there's a couple of things that you can go and make use of today to get yourself moving from, as you've heard me talk about now, from the struggling expert to the sought-after expert in 2022. So I want to say thank you very much to Parker for being such an amazing guest today. It's been an insightful conversation. Merry Christmas to everybody. It's been a wonderful year sharing with you guys. We've brought to you many, many guests over the last 12 months, and we're going to have many more in 2022. We'll be kicking off the show again. It'll be both Wednesdays and Fridays in the new year, 10 a.m. Brisbane time. But thanks very much for being a wonderful guest and sharing your wisdom with us today and the viewers here at the Unlock Show. Parker, it's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
You are very welcome. All right, everybody, we'll have a fantastic Christmas and a wonderful new year, and I'm wishing you all the best in 2022, and I look forward to your viewership moving forward in the next year, and I'll see you guys back after Christmas. So bye for now. Have a wonderful rest of the year. Bye guys.